The blizzard raged across the northern tundra with a fury that seemed almost alive. Inside the weather station, Dmitry Volkov hunched over his monitoring equipment, watching screens that displayed endless columns of atmospheric data. He had been stationed at Outpost Kepler for 8 months now, alone except for the automated systems that hummed quietly around him. The isolation suited him. After what happened in Geneva, he preferred the company of machines to people. The station creaked under the assault of wind and ice. Dmitry barely noticed anymore. These walls had withstood worse storms than this. He reached for his coffee mug, found it empty, and set it back down with a sigh. Another night, another storm, another shift of watching numbers scroll across screens while the world outside tried to tear itself apart. Then he heard it. A sound that did not belong to wind or ice or the groaning of stressed metal. Something was scratching at the outer door of the airlock. Dmitry frowned and pulled up the external camera feed. The image was grainy, obscured by horizontal sheets of snow, but movement caught his eye near the base of the door. Something small and dark pressed against the reinforced steel. He adjusted the camera angle and felt his breath catch. The creature was no larger than a house cat, with scales that glimmered faintly even through the storm. 2 small wings lay crumpled against its back, and its head lifted weakly toward the camera. Dragon-kin. Dmitry recognized it immediately from the briefings every outpost worker received. The species was classified as extremely dangerous. Adults could level entire settlements. The protocol was clear and unambiguous. Do not engage. Do not provide aid. Report sightings immediately to military command. But this was not an adult. This was a hatchling, and it was dying. Dmitry watched as the small dragon tried to scratch the door again, its movements growing weaker. Frost crept across its scales like a spreading disease. The temperature outside hovered at -40 degrees. Nothing survived that exposure for long without shelter. He should follow protocol. He should let nature take its course. Dragon-kin were not native to Earth, and their presence here resulted from the territorial wars that had erupted when humanity first ventured into colonized space. These creatures attacked human ships, destroyed mining operations, and killed anyone who wandered into their claimed territories. Helping one, even a hatchling, violated every regulation in the operational manual. Dmitry stared at the screen for a long moment. The hatchling collapsed against the door, its sides heaving with labored breaths. He thought about Geneva. He thought about the orders he had followed without question, the ones that still haunted his sleep 5 years later. He thought about the difference between following rules and doing what felt right. His hand moved to the airlock controls before he could talk himself out of it. The outer door hissed open, and wind screamed into the chamber. Dmitry grabbed his thermal coat and stepped into the brutal cold. The air burned his lungs even through his respirator. He knelt beside the small dragon and carefully lifted it. The creature weighed almost nothing, far too light for something with bones and muscle. It made a soft chirping sound but did not struggle. It had no strength left to fight. Back inside the station, Dmitry cleared space near the heating unit and laid the hatchling down on a folded blanket. Up close, the damage was extensive. Cracks ran through the scales like fractured glass. The wing membranes had tears that looked days old, probably from a fall or attack. The creature's eyes opened halfway, revealing irises that shifted between green and gold. There was intelligence in that gaze, something that went beyond animal instinct. The dragon was aware, thinking, trying to determine if it had found safety or simply traded one death for another. Dmitry sat back and met those eyes steadily. He did not know if the creature could understand human speech, but he spoke anyway. His voice was rough from disuse, the voice of someone who rarely needed to talk to anyone. You are safe here. Rest now. The dragon blinked slowly, some of the tension leaving its small body. It tucked its head beneath one damaged wing and closed its eyes. Dmitry stood and moved to his monitoring station. He pulled up the long-range thermal scanners and ran a sweep of the surrounding area. The screen populated with data, and his stomach tightened. 3 massive heat signatures moved through the storm 2 kilometers away. Each registered as large as a cargo transport. Adult dragon kin, almost certainly searching for the hatchling. They were coming this way, but their approach seemed cautious rather than aggressive. They stopped at what might be considered a respectful distance, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid seeming threatening. The behavior puzzled Dmitri. Everything he knew about dragon kin suggested they should be attacking already, not holding position and watching. He looked at the hatchling sleeping near his heater. The small chest rose and fell with steady breaths now, no longer the desperate gasps from before. Dmitri gathered supplies, working quietly to avoid disturbing it. He filled a bowl with water and set out various food items from his stores. Protein bars, dried fruit, synthetic meat products, even some of the emergency nutrient paste that tasted like cardboard but contained everything a body needed to survive. The hatchling opened one eye when Dmitri knelt beside it again. It saw the food and water but showed no interest. It simply closed its eye and remained still. Dmitri frowned. Dehydration and starvation would kill it just as surely as the cold outside. He tried offering different items, holding them close enough for the dragon to smell. Nothing sparked interest or appetite. "You must eat something," Dmitri said, hearing frustration creep into his voice. "You will not survive if you do not." The hatchling lifted its head slightly and looked past him toward the food synthesizer mounted on the far wall. The machine hummed its usual background noise, indicator lights blinking in their standard pattern. The dragon's eyes tracked those lights with sudden focus, watching them pulse in sequence. Its nostrils flared, and for the first time since entering the station, it showed genuine interest in something. Dmitri followed its gaze, trying to understand what had caught its attention. The synthesizer was just a machine, standard-issue equipment that converted base proteins and minerals into edible food. Nothing about it should interest a creature from an alien species. Unless the dragon recognized something humans did not. He stood and approached the synthesizer, studying it with fresh eyes. The machine operated on principles of molecular recombination, breaking down raw materials and reassembling them into nutritious products. It generated heat as a byproduct, released specific energy signatures during operation, and produced particular wavelengths of light visible only on certain spectrums. The hatchling chirped again, louder this time. It tried to stand but its legs collapsed beneath it. The effort cost what little energy it had regained. Dmitri made a decision. He opened the synthesizer's control panel and began adjusting parameters, shifting the output toward higher energy densities and different molecular configurations. He had no idea what dragonkin ate, but if the creature recognized something about this machine, maybe its instincts would guide them both. The synthesizer whirred and clicked as it processed the new instructions. A small portion of glowing paste emerged from the dispenser, luminescent and warm. Dmitri scooped it into a bowl and brought it to the hatchling. The dragon's head lifted immediately. Its nostrils flared again, and this time it extended a small forked tongue to taste the air. The reaction was instant. The hatchling pulled itself forward on trembling legs and began to eat, not with desperate hunger but with careful, deliberate bites. Dmitri sat back and watched, relief flooding through him. The dragon ate slowly, taking breaks between bites, but it ate. Color began to return to its scales, subtle but noticeable. After finishing half the bowl, the hatchling looked up at him and made a sound that might have been gratitude or simply acknowledgement. It returned to its blanket and curled up again, but this time its breathing seemed stronger. Outside, the 3 adult dragon-kin remained in position, unmoving despite the raging storm. Dmitri checked his screens again and saw they had not advanced or retreated. They simply waited, as if they knew their hatchling had found shelter and were content to keep watch from a distance. He wondered what they thought of a human providing aid to one of their young. He wondered what would happen when the storm broke and decisions had to be made about what came next. For now, though, the hatchling was safe, warm, and fed. That had to be enough. Dmitri settled into his chair and kept watch over both his screens and his unexpected guest. The blizzard continued to rage outside, but inside the station, something fragile and unexpected had taken root. Trust, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding between two species that had only known each other as enemies. Whatever it was, Dmitri found himself hoping it would survive the coming dawn. Morning arrived without fanfare. The storm had diminished to light snow, and pale sunlight filtered through the observation windows. Dmitri had not slept. He spent the night monitoring both the hatchling and the 3 adult dragon kin who maintained their vigil outside. The adults had not moved from their position 2 kilometers away, and their patience unnerved him more than aggression would have. The hatchling stirred as natural light filled the station. It lifted its head and blinked against the brightness, then carefully stretched its wings. The movement was cautious, testing, and Dmitri noticed the tears in the membranes looked slightly smaller than before. Dragon kin healed fast, apparently. The creature looked around the station with clear eyes, taking in its surroundings properly for the first time. Its gaze moved from the equipment banks to the food synthesizer to Dmitri himself, cataloging everything with obvious intelligence. Dmitri remained still, letting the dragon observe without interference. After a long moment, the hatchling stood on unsteady legs and took a few experimental steps. It wobbled but did not fall. Progress. It moved to the water bowl Dmitri had left out and drank deeply, then turned to look at him with those shifting green and gold eyes. "Good morning," Dmitri said quietly. "How do you feel?" The dragon tilted its head, processing the sounds even if it could not understand the words. It made a soft trilling noise, not quite a chirp and not quite a growl. Something communicative. Dmitri took that as a positive sign. He moved slowly to the food synthesizer and prepared another portion of the glowing paste. The hatchling watched his every movement with sharp attention. When Dmitri set the bowl down, the dragon approached and ate with more enthusiasm than before. Its scales had brightened noticeably overnight, the dull gray giving way to deeper blues and silvers. Beauty emerged as health returned. While the hatchling ate, Dmitri checked his communication array. He should report this situation to command. Protocol demanded it. But reporting meant military response, meant containment teams, meant the hatchling would be taken for study or eliminated as a potential threat. The adults outside would attack if humans tried to take their young. Blood would be spilled on all sides, and whatever fragile peace existed in this moment would shatter. Dmitri's finger hovered over the transmission key. He thought about Geneva again, about following orders that led to unnecessary deaths. He thought about the weight of those decisions and whether he could carry more of that burden. His hand moved away from the key. Not yet. He needed more time to understand what was happening here. The hatchling finished eating and returned to its blanket, but instead of sleeping, it sat up and watched Dmitri with focused interest. Its head swiveled to track his movements as he prepared his own breakfast. When Dmitri sat down to eat, the dragon made a decision. It stood, walked across the floor with increasing steadiness, and settled down near his feet. Not touching, but close enough to indicate trust. Dmitri looked down at the creature. This close, he could see intricate patterns in its scales, designs that seemed almost deliberate rather than random. The eyes held depths that suggested complex thought. This was not a simple animal. This was a sentient being, young and vulnerable, but sentient nonetheless. "You need a name," Dmitri said aloud. "I cannot keep calling you hatchling." The dragon tilted its head again, watching his mouth form words. Dmitri considered options. Traditional names felt wrong. This creature came from beyond Earth, from territories humanity barely understood. It deserved something that reflected its nature rather than human conventions. "Solia," he said finally. "Like the sun. Your scales shine that way." The dragon, Solia, made her trilling sound again. Whether she understood the significance or simply liked the sound, Dmitri could not tell. But she seemed to accept it, settling more comfortably at his feet. The day passed quietly. Dmitri worked on his reports, careful to document atmospheric data while leaving out any mention of his guest. Solia explored the station in careful stages, investigating corners and equipment with a curious nose. She showed particular interest in anything that generated heat or light, drawn to energy sources like a moth to flame. At one point, she discovered Dmitri's small collection of books and knocked one to the floor. The thud startled her backward, wings flaring in alarm, but when nothing attacked, she crept forward and sniffed the fallen book with cautious interest. Dmitri watched her antics with something approaching amusement. He had forgotten what it felt like to share space with another living being who was not trying to complete mission objectives or file efficiency reports. Solia's presence brought an unexpected warmth to the station that had nothing to do with temperature. By afternoon, the dragon had grown bold enough to attempt flight. Her first try ended in an awkward tumble as her damaged wings failed to generate enough lift. She landed in an undignified heap and sat there for a moment, looking offended by physics itself. Dmitri bit back a smile. Solia glared at him as if she knew he found her failure amusing, then tried again. This time she managed a few seconds of hovering before gravity reasserted control. "You will get there," Dmitri assured her. "Healing takes time." As evening approached, Dmitri prepared dinner for both of them. He had refined the synthesizer's output based on Solia's reactions, creating something that apparently better matched dragon-kin nutritional needs. She ate with obvious satisfaction, then did something that surprised him. She brought her empty bowl to where he sat and placed it at his feet, looking up expectantly. The gesture was so clearly learned behavior that Dmitri felt his chest tighten. Someone had taught her this. She had a family, a culture, a place where she learned how to ask for things politely. She was not just a lost animal. She was a child separated from her people. "Your family is outside," Dmitri said gently. "They have been waiting all day. They know you are here." Solia looked toward the door, then back at Dmitri. She made a sound that held notes of sadness and uncertainty. Whatever had happened to separate her from the adults outside, she was not ready to face them yet. Fear flickered in her eyes, visible even through her alien features. Dmitri made a decision. He stood and moved to the communication console, but instead of contacting human command, he activated the external speakers. If dragon-kin could communicate across distance, maybe the adults would understand a gesture of peace. He opened an audio channel and spoke clearly. "Your young is safe. She is healing. When she is ready, she will return to you." He had no idea if they could understand human language or even hear frequencies humans used. But he had to try. The three adults outside shifted position slightly, the first movement they had made in over 24 hours. They did not approach or attack. They simply acknowledged his words in some way, then settled back into their patient vigil. Solia chirped softly, a sound that held gratitude and relief. She moved closer to Dmitri and, for the first time, made physical contact. She pressed her small body against his leg, scales warm against his skin. Trust made manifest. Dmitri reached down and carefully placed his hand on her head. Solia did not flinch or pull away. She leaned into the touch, eyes closing slightly. Something formed between them in that moment, a bond that crossed the boundaries of species and history. He was not her parent, and she was not his child, but they were connected now in ways that mattered more than biology. The night deepened outside. Dmitri dimmed the station lights to something more comfortable, and Solia curled up on her blanket near the heater. But tonight she did not close her eyes immediately. She watched Dmitri work at his console, tracked his movements with sleepy attention, and did not relax completely until he settled into his own sleeping area nearby. "Rest well," Dmitri said into the quiet darkness. "Tomorrow we will figure out what comes next." Solia made a small sound of acknowledgement. Within minutes, her breathing had evened into sleep. Dmitri lay awake longer, staring at the ceiling and thinking about choices and consequences. He had broken protocol to save a life. He had formed a connection with a creature his species considered an enemy. He had no idea what the future held or how this situation would resolve. But for tonight, a young dragon slept safely, healing in warmth and comfort. 3 adults waited outside, trusting a human to care for their young. And Dmitri Volkov, who had spent 5 years avoiding connections to anything or anyone, found himself responsible for a life that depended on him completely. The weight of that responsibility felt different from the burden of Geneva. This weight held purpose. This weight felt right. 3 days passed in a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Solia grew stronger each day, her scales brightening to vibrant blues and deep silvers that caught the light like polished metal. The tears in her wing membranes sealed themselves with remarkable speed, and by the 3rd morning, she could fly across the station with increasing confidence. She remained small, roughly the size of a medium dog now that proper nutrition filled out her frame, but her movements carried grace and power that hinted at the formidable creature she would become. The adults outside had not moved. They maintained their distant vigil with patience that spoke of deep trust or profound hope. Dmitri wondered what they thought, watching their young heal in the care of a human. He wondered if they debated among themselves whether to intervene or if they had reached some consensus that this arrangement served their purposes. Dragon kin remained largely mysterious to humanity despite decades of conflict. Their society, their culture, their ways of thinking, all remained hidden behind scales and fire. On the 3rd afternoon, everything changed. Dmitri was preparing lunch when his communication array blazed to life with an emergency override signal. He froze, recognizing the code. Military command, priority alpha classification. Someone had discovered the dragon kin presence near his station. He moved to the console and accepted the transmission. Commander Ostrovsky's face appeared on screen, weathered and hard. Volkov. We have thermal signatures indicating dragon kin activity in your sector. 3 adults, holding position 2 kilometers from your station. Report status immediately. Dmitri felt Solia press against his leg, sensing his tension. He kept his expression neutral, falling into old military habits. Station secure, Commander. Systems operational. No hostile contact. The dragon kin have maintained position for 72 hours. That behavior is unprecedented. Explain. Dmitri's mind raced. He could lie, claim ignorance, buy more time. But Ostrovsky had not survived 30 years in command by accepting easy explanations. The truth would emerge eventually. The only question was whether Dmitri controlled how and when. There is a juvenile dragon kin in my station, he said clearly. It arrived during the storm 3 days ago, near death from exposure. I provided medical assistance. The adults outside are family members waiting for the juvenile to recover. Silence stretched across the channel. Ostrovsky's expression did not change, but his eyes went very cold. You violated first contact protocols. You violated quarantine regulations. You endangered this entire sector by harboring an alien entity without authorization. I am dispatching a containment team immediately. They will arrive in 6 hours. You will surrender the creature upon their arrival for transport to research facilities. Do you understand these orders? Dmitri looked down at Solia. She watched him with those intelligent eyes, not understanding the words but reading his body language with perfect clarity. She knew something was wrong. Her scales dimmed slightly, colors muting with stress. I understand, Dmitri said carefully. Good. Ostrovsky out. The screen went dark. Dmitri stood motionless for a long moment, feeling the weight of what was coming. A containment team meant soldiers, weapons, protocols designed to neutralize threats. Solia would be taken, studied, probably never reunited with her family. The adults outside would attack when humans tried to take their young. People would die. Dragon kin would die. And the fragile connection forming here, the first real communication between species, would shatter before it could develop into something meaningful. Solia chirped questioningly. Dimitri knelt and placed his hand on her head. "We have a problem," he said quietly. "My people are coming. They will want to take you away from your family. I cannot allow that to happen." He moved to his equipment locker and began pulling out supplies. Emergency rations, medical kit, thermal gear, portable power cells. Everything he would need to survive away from the station. Solia watched him with growing alarm, sensing the urgency in his movements. Dimitri activated his external speakers again. "Dragon kin outside. Your young is healthy enough to travel. But humans are coming who will try to take her. We have 6 hours. I will bring her to you, but we need to leave this place. All of us." He had no way to know if they understood. But 3 massive forms shifted position simultaneously, turning to face the direction human transports would approach from. They understood. Whether through language comprehension or simple intelligence, they grasped the situation. Dimitri gathered the last of his supplies and sealed them in a transport pack. He looked around the station that had been his home for 8 months, his refuge from a world that expected too much and forgave too little. He was leaving behind everything, abandoning his post, violating more regulations than he could count. Court-martial waited if command ever caught him. Prison, probably, or worse. But when he looked at Solia, those consequences felt distant and unimportant. She trusted him. Her family trusted him. That trust was worth more than following orders that would lead to suffering. "Come," he said, opening the station door. "Time to go home." Solia hesitated at the threshold. Cold air rushed in, though nothing like the killing freeze of 3 days ago. She looked back at the warm station, then at Dimitri, then toward the distant forms of her family. She chirped once, decisively, and stepped outside. Her wings spread, testing the air. She launched herself skyward with powerful beats, spiraling upward in pure joy at being free and whole. Dimitri watched her fly toward the adults, watched them rear up in greeting, watched the reunion of families separated by misfortune and brought together by unexpected kindness. The largest adult, scales the color of deep ocean, turned its massive head toward Dimitri. Their eyes met across the distance. Something passed between them, understanding or acknowledgement or perhaps just mutual respect between beings who had chosen mercy over violence. Then the adult dragon dipped its head low in what could only be interpreted as invitation or command. Dimitri approached slowly, aware of his own insignificance next to these massive creatures. Solia perched on the adult's back, chirping excitedly and gesturing toward Dimitri with one wing. The dragon lowered itself further, presenting its neck as a mounting point. Dimitri understood what was being offered. Escape. Protection. A place among them, at least temporarily. He climbed onto the dragon's neck, finding purchase among scales large as dinner plates. The creature's body radiated heat like a furnace, comfortable against the Arctic air. Solia settled beside him, pressing close. The dragon launched skyward with power that stole Dimitri's breath. The other 2 adults flanked them, forming a protective formation. They flew north, away from human territories, into wild spaces where command's reach grew thin. Dimitri looked back once and saw his station growing small in the distance. Somewhere behind them, a containment team would arrive to find nothing but empty rooms and unanswered questions. Solia chirped and nudged his hand with her nose. Dimitri smiled and stroked her scales. Whatever came next, whatever challenges waited in this uncertain future, he had made his choice. He had chosen connection over isolation, mercy over protocol, trust over fear. 5 years ago in Geneva, he had followed orders that haunted him. Today, he had broken orders to save a life. The difference felt like redemption. As they flew into the northern wastes, Dmitry Volkov felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of Geneva began to lift, replaced by something better. Purpose. Hope. The beginning of understanding between species that had only known war. It started with one small dragon seeking shelter and one scarred human opening his door. Where it would lead, none of them could know. But it would be better than what came before. That much, Dmitry believed absolutely.